actually. Okay, there we go. We're being recorded now. So I'll get us started. I would say a lot of people would say that one of their main aims in going into business is to make money. Okay, that's one of their main purposes or goals. And one thing I do want to stress this semester is that's perfectly fine to have as a purpose. In fact, I think it's a very justifiable purpose. There's nothing wrong in a capitalist system with desiring to make profit or to benefit self, as long as one does not do so in a way that ends up undermining uh, the respect and dignity of others. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on this semester. All right, but I'll put that out on the table as the first purpose that many people have and ought to have in the course of their lives in business. Let's take a minute, and if some other people could weigh in here, what are some other reasons why you might want to go into business, or why one might want to go into business? What are some other purposes? If I could have a couple students just weigh in here on what some of the purposes of business are.
Hello?
Yeah,
Hello? Can you hear me?
yeah, Daniel, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. In my opinion, say if you found something that can be revolutionizing an industry, such as electric cars, you can kind of change the whole direction of the industry. And whether it's like for environmental purposes or anything else, it's just kind of brings in a change.
Okay, excellent. I love that. So let me summarize what Daniel just said excellently. As maybe a purpose of business is to innovate in a way that improves the lives of others. Okay, and maybe that's electric cars, electric vehicles. Maybe that means innovating for the sake of benefiting the environment. So not just improving the lives of others, but maybe improving the community welfare also. Okay, I think those are outstanding reasons to want to go into business. What are some other reasons to want to go into business?
To control your own kind of like destiny, I guess you could say.
Okay,
To to know you're your own boss.
okay, to be able to be self-employed or to work for oneself, maybe we could include as part of that to gain financial independence so as to have greater freedom. I think those are excellent reasons to want to go into business. I might add as another purpose of business to provide others with employment. Okay, if you want to run a business and hire people, it is a good thing to provide people with employment. If you think about humans and their relationship with work, humans do much better when we have things to do, when we have jobs or tasks to do, when we have something to organize our thinking and our days each day. The statistics on how many people die within 6 years, within 6 months of retirement are really quite frightening, because they retire and they have nothing to do. And it's because humans seem to be built for work. So it's good to work oneself, and it's good to provide work for others. That's an excellent purpose of business. Okay, are there any others that we could throw out there? Reasons for reasons you want to go into business.
To connect with customers and come up with new ideas to improve on already made stuff.
Okay, to connect relationally with people, certainly reconciliation to others through business is a very excellent aim. And also to innovate or to create in a way that improves the lives of others, as Daniel mentioned earlier. Okay, excellent, good. Okay, so he is in chat and says people have creative ideas and want to make it come true. Okay, excellent. Yep, to innovate so as to improve the lives of others. How about to glorify God through one's work? Okay, God gives us work to do as human beings, and going into business, as long as it's an honorable profession, not something where you're predatory and trying to relieve people of their money by inducing them to make foolish decisions or something. But you know, an honorable profession where you're trying to help others, benefit others, even as you benefit yourself financially. That's an honorable thing to do that glorifies God through your work. Okay, excellent, good. I like all of these responses. Okay, we're going to be looking in this first module at purposes in business from two perspectives. One perspective is an individual perspective. What is my purpose in business? What should be my purpose as an individual in business? And the other perspective might be called a social perspective. So what is the purpose of a business as an enterprise or as a collective? Okay, and today what we're going to do is we're going to look at a couple of different, after we just engaged in this perspective building exercise on individual purpose in business, we're now going to look at a couple of different views on this, the purpose of business as a collective enterprise. Okay, and the first view we're going to look at is a very famous view. It's a view held by about 50% of business ethicists, I would say. It might be called the shareholder view or the owner-based view of the purpose of business. And if you guys would open up Blackboard and download or open the Milton Friedman article, which was due on Tuesday, to be read on Tuesday. We're going to be going over that article and talking a little bit about it. Okay, so Milton Friedman was a very famous economist, probably the second most famous economist of the 20th century after John Maynard Keynes. And Milton Friedman held to an owner-based or a shareholder-based view of business. And on Friedman's view, the purpose of business is to do what the owners desire. Okay, and if you guys could be opening up the Friedman article while I say this, that would be great. On Friedman's view, the purpose of business is to do what the owners desire. The owners are the ones, after all, who provide the capital base by which the business runs. The business would not function without them. And because they are essential, in fact, they're necessary for providing the capital that enables the business to operate, the purpose of the business should be to do what they desire. And for Friedman, what they desire is almost always to make money, okay? So the purpose of business should be to make the owners money. Now, sometimes the owners might desire something else. There are a few instances Friedman thinks where it's possible for the owners to desire some social goal or some charitable enterprise as their reasons for running the business. But almost always he seems to think the owner's aim is to make money. Okay, so insofar as the activities of the business make money, for the owners, the business is doing something that is justifiable on Friedman's view. Now, let's take a look at the article itself and look at this first page. And Friedman is writing the article from the perspective of a corporate executive for a publicly traded company. So you might think of the CEO of Nike or of Apple or of I don't know, Chevron or something like that. Okay, the corporate executive, he says, is beholden as a fiduciary to the shareholders and should do as the shareholders desire. Let's read from the article towards the bottom of the first page. Could I have a volunteer to please read the paragraph "in a free enterprise private property system"?
I can do it.
Thank you, Rebecca.
In a free enterprise private property system, a corporate executive is an employee of the owners of the business. He has direct responsibility to his employers. That responsibility is to conduct the business in accordance with their desires, which generally will be to make as much money as possible while confronting to their basic rules of the society. both those embodied in law and those embodied in an ethical custom. Of course, in some cases, his employees may have a different objective. A group of persons might establish a corporation for an eleemosynary purpose, for example, a hospital or a school. The manager of such a corporation will not have money profit as its objectives, but the rendering of certain services.
Good, and I'll read the next paragraph. In either case, the key point is that in his capacity as a corporate executive, the manager is the agent of the individuals who own the corporation or establish the eleemosynary institution, and his primary responsibility is to them. Excellent, good reading. Thank you, Rebecca. So there you have it. If the executive is making money for the shareholders or for the owners of the business, then he is doing something that is a justifiable enterprise. He is aiming at a purpose that is justifiable on Friedman's view. Notice that Friedman does add the important caveat that the executive of the business needs to play by the legal rules. So he can make money, but he can't make money by doing something that's outside of the bounds of the law as established for the business enterprise in a particular country like the United States. As long as he conforms to the rules of the game and abides by the laws, as it were, then he is doing something that is justifiable. Okay, now, the business executive does wrong on Friedman's view if he takes the profits of the business and devotes them to some social cause, okay, or some social responsibility or aim, like environmental protection or like after school basketball programs for disadvantaged youth or something like that, or tutoring programs to educate people out of poverty or something like that. The executive does wrong if he is devoting the profits of the company to those things when the desire of the shareholders is to make money. Okay, and since the desire of the owners or the shareholders is almost always to make money, Friedman is not a very big fan of corporate social responsibility. However, the business executive is not just an executive. He plays a couple of roles in his life. He is an executive, to be sure, but he's also an individual. Okay, and as an individual, Friedman thinks that he can do what he wants with his salary and the profits that he himself obtains from the company. But in his capacity as an executive, his job is to make money for the owners of the company. Okay, and if I could have another volunteer, please, to read on the second page of the Friedman article, the paragraph that starts, of course, the corporate executive. This is towards the top of the second page.
I can read.
Thank you.
Of course, the corporate executive is also a person in his own right. As a person, he may have many other responsibilities that he recognizes or assumes voluntarily to his family, his conscience, his feelings of charity, his church, his clubs, his city, his country. He may feel impelled by these responsibilities to devote part of his income to causes he regards as worthy, to refuse to work for particular corporations, even to leave his job. For example, to join his country's armed forces. If we wish, we may refer to some of these responsibilities as social responsibilities. But in these respects, he is acting as a principal, not an agent. He is spending his own money or time or energy, not the money of his employers or the time or energy he has contracted to devote to their purposes. If there are social responsibilities, they are the social responsibilities of individuals, not business.
Excellent, thank you, good reading. So there we have it. Friedman thinks that as an individual, the executive or manager can give charitably, donate his own personal profits, as it were, to enterprises that are of a social nature, okay? But he cannot, as an executive of the company, do something that is like that if it is contrary to the owner's wishes. Okay, notice that it is possible on Friedman's view for businesses to donate to charity or to promote the welfare of their community if doing so will promote profits for the owners. Okay, so let me just take a case in point here. A long time ago, before COVID started, back in another lifetime, my wife and I loved to go to the Houston Rodeo. I don't know if we're going to have a rodeo again this year. We love to go to the Houston Rodeo, and the Houston Rodeo is sponsored by all sorts of corporate sponsors. Okay, so for instance, if you watch the chuck wagon race in the rodeo, you can see different chuck wagons running around the arena. They all have corporate logos on their sides, you know, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, HEB, Kroger, places like that. And I'm sure it's all rigged, but it's fun to root for your particular corporate chuck wagon. Okay. That's one of the best events in the rodeo. I think the best event in the rodeo is actually the mutton busting, which is where the little kids ride on the backs of the sheep. I love that, but chuck wagon is a good close second. Okay. All right, so now let's just take a sponsor of the chuck wagon. So HEB is a sponsor of the chuck wagon race. HEB is a well-known Texas grocer. On Friedman's view, HEB is justified in doing something like sponsoring the rodeo and the chuck wagon race if doing so will bring about profits for themselves. Okay. Now, for sure, HEB gets something out of being a rodeo sponsor. They get publicity. People go to the rodeo, they see HEB sponsoring the rodeo. They think to themselves, oh, I want to support HEB because HEB is a corporate sponsor that helps, you know, uphold and preserve and protect the kinds of social events that I like. Okay, so HEB does get some customer visibility out of it. If they get enough customer visibility to help promote profits for themselves, that's a justifiable outlay of their cash on Friedman's view. But if they do not, if they're just doing it for the sake of community improvement or betterment, or because they think they have some social responsibility to give back, as it were, regardless of whether or not it benefits themselves, then almost always that's unjustifiable on Friedman's view because they're not aiming at making profits for owners. Okay, so there is space for corporate social responsibility, but just insofar as it benefits owners or does what owners desire, namely make profits. Okay, let me pause and ask if there are questions of clarification about Friedman's view. Do we all kind of understand the view? Okay, good. Now let me ask if there are criticisms that people can raise against Friedman's view. Do you agree with Friedman's view? Do you disagree with it? Why or why not? Is this the purpose of business?
I would say overall I disagree with Friedman's view, but I see that Friedman has a valid point. But what if the owners of the company think that it's best for their business to improve by doing some charitable events that don't necessarily make profit?
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Yeah, so I think Friedman does allow, technically speaking, space for owners of businesses who want their business to make charitable donations as part of the goal of the business. But I think he also seems to think that very few owners will actually want that. So he does seem to have that as an emphasis. Okay, good comment. Anybody else? Criticisms of Friedman's view?
I guess I'll say I do see where he's coming from, since a business is kind of like the main goal is to make money. And then let's say you do give a couple of times, but eventually your business starts your business or your brand starts to be known as not a business but a charity, it kind of defeats the purpose of being a business.
Sure. Good. Thank you. Good comment. So for sure, businesses need to make profits in a capitalist enterprise. They aren't run at a loss like churches or charitable organizations where they make up the difference by means of donations. Okay. Businesses are intended to be run as profitable enterprises. And in fact, one thing that I do want to emphasize in this first module is that aiming at profit is a perfectly justifiable purpose to be aiming at in business. Okay, profit could be seen as like a self-interested purpose, since you're trying to improve your own position. The danger with aiming at profits as a purpose of business comes when you do so by means of undermining the dignity or respect that is due to others. Okay, so if you do so through predatory actions or through hoodwinking customers, or like Ford did with the Pinto case, if you do so at the expense of customer safety, then your pursuit of profit as a goal of business is probably it's probably become unhealthy. In fact, it has become unhealthy, and you are pursuing it in ways that undermine other kinds of moral obligations that you have. Okay, I want to raise two criticisms to add to these comments from others against Friedman's view. Okay, two criticisms. So I mentioned earlier about 50% of business ethicists uphold Friedman's view, about 50% oppose it. Okay, and I'm actually in the opposing camp. I don't think that this should be the purpose of business. Okay, and here are a couple of criticisms to help us articulate our understanding of that. One is, I think probably if Friedman's view were to be universally adopted in American business, charitable giving by businesses would plummet. Okay, charitable giving would collapse. And charitable giving is an important way for businesses actually to do good with their profits. And I think that that would plummet. Friedman calls it a tax. Okay, it's a tax on the owners of the business, since a tax is best defined on his view as a coercive redistribution of someone's wealth over and against his own will. Okay, why would charitable giving plummet? Well, HEB sponsors the rodeo, okay, but quite frankly, at the end of the day, I suspect that the amount of money that it takes for HEB to sponsor the rodeo is not enough to justify them doing that. Okay, and that's actually the case for most forms of corporate social involvement. Chick-fil-A runs basketball camps for, runs after-school basketball camps for disadvantaged youth in Atlanta, which is Chick-fil-A's hometown. Do they get something out of that? Yeah, they get some good publicity. Is it worth the amount of money it takes for them to run those basketball camps? No, it almost never is. Okay, so because of that, I think that it's very likely in practice that charitable giving would plummet if Friedman's view were to be universally adopted. One more example here to help us understand the point. One case study we're doing in these first couple of weeks is Starbucks. Okay, Starbucks devotes a lot of their profits to fair trade coffee with developing world farmers. They pay these farmers prices that are a little bit higher than what they could potentially negotiate these farmers down to. Okay, they could potentially rub these farmers down into the dirt because many of these farmers are very small operators and Starbucks is an enormous enterprise, so there's asymmetric negotiating power in their contractual encounter with the farmers. But Starbucks chooses not to do that. They choose instead to pay a little bit more for fair trade coffee, a little bit more than what they could potentially pay these farmers. Does Starbucks get good publicity out of that? Yes. Is it publicity that results in more customer involvement to an extent that outweighs the amount of money that Starbucks loses by the fair trade plan? Almost certainly not. Okay, almost certainly not. So that sort of a thing would probably collapse. Okay, so criticism number one is that charitable giving would collapse in practice. Criticism number 2 that I want us to consider is that Friedman's view seems to imply a certain egoism in the business enterprise. Okay, now, as I mentioned a minute ago, there's nothing wrong with egoistic thinking in capitalism as such. In fact, the system is designed to encourage egoistic thinking. We'll talk about the structure of a capitalist system a little later this semester, but for now, for our purposes today, let me just say this. A capitalist system is an economic system where goods and services are exchanged. Okay, and the idea is that the collective can benefit if each participant in the system is looking after his or her own interests in the exchange of goods and services. The collective can benefit when each individual looks after his or her own interests. So for example, Steve Jobs could be an example here of this phenomenon. Okay, Steve Jobs, famous Apple exec, wanted to change the world and become really, really wealthy in doing so. Okay, he wanted to benefit himself, wanted to make a lot of money, wanted to be a very wealthy man. Okay, so he decided he was going to do something that would also benefit others as well. Now, I know it's controversial whether smartphones actually are good for humans. That's becoming increasingly controversial with social media and all that, right? But let's assume that that is a good thing. And he accomplished that by seeking to enrich himself. Okay, so a capitalist system is a system where egoism or self-centered thinking is encouraged or promoted for the sake of benefit to the collective, because the idea is you can incentivize creativity like Steve Jobs' creativity, or you can incentivize hard work when you reward individuals for their self-centered thinking. Okay, so egoism is fine as such. Okay, however, egoistic thinking can become very unhealthy in a capitalist system. Okay, we saw it in the Ford Pinto case. Here are these executives who are just thinking of themselves, egoistic consequentialism. They're doing so at the expense of customers, where they don't respect or treat customers with dignity. Instead, they seek to exploit customers, ultimately sacrificing some of their customers' lives for the sake of their own profits. The ideal in business, this is one thing I do want to really push in this first module here. The ideal for you and for me in business ought to be to think of self and to think of others simultaneously, okay? This is a way of approaching business that is consistent with Christian moral principles. And I'm not sure if Friedman's view, if pursued to its logical conclusion, is consistent with Christian moral principles. We are told throughout the Christian scriptures that we're supposed to think of the welfare of others. Okay, we're supposed to not just consider our own interests, but also the interests of others. This is a prevailing theme. And in a capitalist system, you can be successful if you seek to benefit self and your customers simultaneously. If you seek to benefit both self and others at the same time. Okay, if you are, say, a disciple of Friedman's view, and Friedman says, look, if the owners desire just making profits and you seek as an executive just to make profits, but you don't think about things like the welfare of your customers, then you're going to end up exploiting people, or you're going to end up doing harm to the environment. Okay, or you're going to end up doing some other dastardly deed. Maybe you'll be a slumlord who will run apartments that little old ladies can't, I don't know, maybe the little old ladies have all these cockroaches running around their apartments and they're horribly dirty and stuff like that. You do nothing to try to help clean up the apartments because you know that they have no other option, and you're not doing anything illegal, but you are just thinking of self and you're not seeking to benefit customers. Okay, or maybe you'll do like the Ford Pinto execs did, where they sought to, they didn't do anything strictly speaking illegal, since they weren't, you know, intentionally murdering anyone, but they also didn't consider the dignity and welfare of their customers. You know, or maybe you'll be predatory in some other way. Okay, if you just think of self and not of others at the same time, then you end up doing business and being in business in a way that's very hard to square with Christian moral teachings, and also very hard to square just with general common moral sense, okay, which is to treat people with dignity and respect. All right, so those are two criticisms of Friedman's view. One criticism is that it would lead to a collapse in charitable giving, and the other criticism is that it seems to imply an unhealthy kind of an egoism, since the emphasis is all on what the owners desire and nothing on respect and dignity for customers or for other participants in the business enterprise. Okay, any questions or comments about the two criticisms that I've just raised? Okay, I hope everybody's following along and this is an intelligible discussion. Okay, there is an alternative view that's also held by about 50% of business ethicists. And it's the view that I hold. It's the stakeholder view. Okay, and I don't have enough time in today's class to explicate the stakeholder view in detail. We'll have to leave it for next time, but I'll get started and just mention a few of its features. Okay, the stakeholder view is the view that the purpose of business is to benefit a variety of different stakeholders and not just the owners. So if you think about who contributes to the success of a particular business, it's pretty clear that it's not just the owners who provide the capital who contribute to the success of a business. There are a variety of different contributors or participants. The owners are one of those contributors for sure, but others include employees, suppliers, those who provide the raw goods that the business then refines and brings to market, customers, since the customers, without them, there would be no business. They're the ones who are constitute the demand for the product. The community, since the community educates and provides laborers and the surroundings for the business to function. The government, okay, since the government constructs a legal framework that, if it's a good legal framework, will be relatively stable, within which the business enterprise can proceed. The government also provides things like roads and transportation mechanisms. The government provides defense forces to ensure that there's peace and stability so that business transactions can be undertaken. Okay, so there are a variety of different stakeholders on the stakeholder view who each are deserving of a piece of the profit pie. Now, the stakeholder view comes in for some criticisms. Let me actually pause and ask if there are any questions or comments so far. I'm moving kind of quickly here on the stakeholder view because I don't have much time. But let me see if there are questions or comments so far on it. Okay, let me ask you guys real quickly. Why does a business exist? Why do people get together in groups to run businesses rather than each of us just individually making all our own goods and services, or cooking and growing and cooking our own food and stuff? Why do businesses exist?
I think because the combination of a bunch of people's manpower and efforts can make things more better.
Absolutely, yeah, that's absolutely the answer, is that when we operate in teams and each of us specializes in a particular task, and I'll talk about this next week, we can actually accomplish more than when we operate individually and each of us tries to be a generalist and does a bunch of different things. Okay, and
probably a higher quality.
What's that, Matthew?
Yeah, and if you have each person does a single thing often enough, it's going to be a higher quality than if each person tries to do everything themselves.
Absolutely.
So a higher quality as well.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. Okay, and this this team cooperative enterprise, team-based cooperative enterprise, results in a greater overall profits pie. And the question at stake in the stakeholder view is, to whom should the profits be given? And the stakeholder view says there are a variety of different stakeholders who each are deserving of profits by virtue of contributing to the welfare of the business. Okay, but we will save that for next time. Please do the discussion board for this week. Let me pause and ask if there are any logistical questions about stuff going on.
So are we meeting in person next week at the
That's the plan. I'll let you guys in on this real fast. My kid might have COVID, so I might not be in class next week. We will see. Okay, but I will send out an email with further instructions. Okay? All right, good. Good to see you all. God bless. And if you have another question, just email me, okay? Good. Take care.
Thank you.